So we're getting to know another Democratic candidate running for the 19th Congressional District to unseat freshman Republican John Faso. There are many of them, as we've mentioned. Jeff Beals is a history teacher in Woodstock, but before that, he served as a U.S. diplomat in Iraq. He also worked on the foreign policy team for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and he was in the CIA. He joins me now to talk more about his campaign and why he thinks he can beat out all of the others to challenge Congressman Faso. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
That's quite a resume.
Thanks.
I don't know why you would want to be in Congress, after all. Well, in all seriousness, particularly given what we're seeing now. I mean, it's not the FBI, but not the CIA, but the FBI, with all of the distrust and the war really between the White House and intelligence. I mean, why would you want to get involved in that?
Well, look, it comes from that. I mean, I had a government career and I was frustrated by it. And I mean, I worked for this country to bring peace in the Middle East, and that's not an easy thing. And I started my career in the CIA during the first peace talks that broke down between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I left with some disillusionment about what we could achieve. But I think that we, the people here in New York 19, we want to change. And we are a real anti-establishment population that can see new solutions to problems that have bedeviled us for too long.
What's actually amazing also about your background is you were an advisor unpaid to the Clinton campaign on foreign policy, but you also worked with Christopher Stevens, who died in the Benghazi attack. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chris was a close friend of mine. We were diplomats together in the West Bank and Gaza. We were based in Jerusalem, and we lost him in Benghazi.
Were you angry at her for that?
No. I don't approve of the political circus that happened after his death. That was terrible for all of us. But you know, I know what he believed in, and we fought for it together. And that's part of why I stood up to run. You know, his memory is part of this. Working for the Clinton campaign was part of it. I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I've been endorsed by a national group called Justice Democrats, which are pushing for candidates that are standing up, running grassroots campaigns based on what the people want. And I also believe that we could build bridges in the Middle East, we could build bridges in the Democratic Party, and we're doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just before we leave this topic, I would assume that you don't agree with the Trump administration strategy in Israel at this moment, like moving the embassy, for example.
And I spoke out against it, and I called John Faso to task right away on it, and he did the worst sort of pandering to his donor base and to the administration when they decided to move the embassy to Jerusalem. It's a foreign policy decision that makes us less safe here at home. It needlessly blows up a conflict in the Middle East that the world is looking for us to solve. They're looking for us to mediate. They're looking for America to be a voice of peace in this world instead of militaristic.
So you bring up, I mean, it's interesting. There's 6 Democrats that are vying for this right now, right? Only one of you can get the nod. I assume there's going to be a primary battle. I'm not really sure how that's going to hash out. But this is a purple district, really. I mean, it's changed hands a couple of times. Zephyr Teachout was the last person to try and take on John Faso. Now, at the time, the seat was open, but she was pretty progressive, and she did not succeed.
I do not see red, blue, purple as the way to understand our politics right now. The old right-left division doesn't apply. The real division is between popular policies that benefit more than 90% of the people who have been left behind in the economy and corporate policies that benefit the donor class.
That sounds pretty liberal to me. You don't see that?
No, not at all. I think that if you go out there and you support what I support, which is enacting Medicare for all now, taking on the health insurance industry and enacting Medicare for all now, that's a policy that would benefit the great majority of the people in our home.
Well, how do you feel about gun control?
Right now, I think John Faso has blood on his hands for his failure to act. We have an epidemic of gun violence in our country. Gun owners and non-gun owners alike know it. My family has a farm in the Hudson Valley since I'm a kid. We know that a gun can be a tool on a farm. We have plenty of hunting on the farm. We also have guns. And I know from experience that gun owners and non-gun owners alike want sensible gun laws. We should be opening up the laws right now so these gun manufacturers can be sued for what they're doing.
Do you personally own guns?
Yeah.
You do? Like right now in your house?
At our farm.
Oh, at the farm. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting, though. Do you really think it's about guns, or is it about something else? It's just people have talked, and I know they talk around it, and Democrats accuse Republicans of using mental health as sort of a red herring, if you will. But it's a societal failure. It has to be. I mean, we have less gun violence overall, less guns per capita than we used to, and yet we have more mass shootings.
We have a problem of corporate power in our country right now, and that's at the root of so many of these different dilemmas. Right now, you have a consensus. There is absolutely a majority for action to end this epidemic of gun violence. What's blocking it? The NRA and gun manufacturers that want to sell more guns, not the people. And the same thing goes for healthcare. People want Medicare for all to be enacted. They know it should be a human right, not a privilege of the rich.
Expensive. Who's going to pay for it?
On the contrary, a huge cost savings.
In the long run, but at the
huge cost savings right away. Right now, how are we affording giant trillion-dollar tax cuts for the wealthy? How are we affording these massive tax breaks for corporations? The money is there. Do you know how much money it costs to lift a tank off the ground, put it into a jet, and send that C-130 up into the air? A lot, okay? And our military budget was just raised.
So wait, you would support cutting the military budget?
Absolutely, I would. I think we have a bloated national security budget, and it doesn't achieve national security. We don't have our priorities right as a country, and we're not achieving peace in the world.
Okay, so how are you going to, let's assume you get there, right? You get to Congress. I don't know that you'll be in the majority. I know that the Democrats think that they're going to take over the House, but maybe you are, maybe you aren't. It's still a district that is, if you don't like purple, middle of the road, pragmatic, whatever you want to say. There's a lot of Republicans, Democrats, conservative, independents. It's a mixed district. How are you going to work across the aisle, and on what specific policy issue can you work across the aisle?
We already are. We're running a grassroots campaign that has Republicans as our volunteers and Democrats as our volunteers. That should tell you something. It should tell you that when you start advocating policies that benefit 90% of the people in the economy who have not seen a raise for 40 years, all while the stock market and its gains have gone up, but not produced anything for working people, you can rally new coalitions and new majorities.
Do you support, you would not have voted yes on the tax reform bill, I would assume.
Of course not. And John Faso gave a safe vote at the last minute when he was given permission. But the simple fact was that that tax bill was a scam. It was directed against us in this district. It's going to raise taxes on people in this district. It's going to cut Medicare.
Do you support what the governor's doing in terms of trying to get around that?
Well, absolutely. We have to do everything we can to try for fiscal sanity. But the point is, I'm running in New York 19, where I voted against John Faso in the last election and have seen this congressman not lead a fight for us, not stand up for our environment at a time when we are seeing climate breakdown, and we could be creating tremendous number of jobs through green investment. We could be creating jobs in solar, wind, doing it all. But we're not doing any of it.
But why you and not the other five? Plus the independent and whoever all else jumps in before the rest of the campaign is over.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. First of all, I have a lot of government experience that I bring to this.
But never an elected position.
Well, I was a U.S. representative overseas, but you're right. You know, I thought it was very significant work. I was working to bring people together. I helped to mediate the drafting of Iraq's constitution. I briefed congressmen and senators. I served under both administrations, Republicans,
Did you support
Democrats.
the war?
No, the war was waged. I came into it a year into the war, and I had a real judgment call to face as a U.S. diplomat. Chris and I, you mentioned Chris Stevens, watched that war break out and saw the State Department sidelined when it was undertaken. And I decided I had to step up for our country to try to help us get out of it, and I did that. But that's experience that I bring to this, and it is experience working on both sides. And I'm also a working person in this district, and I know where salaries are right now. I know where benefits are and aren't right now, and that's part of what drives me so strongly.
You're a teacher.
Yes.
And I know I don't want to harp too much on gun control, but it's really what we're focused on right now after Parkland.
Yeah.
Do you think that teachers should be armed?
No, on the contrary. We are doing drills in our school for active shooters in which we are traumatizing an entire generation of young people.
You don't think you should do any drills?
Of course we have to do it because of the environment that we're in right now. But it is outrageous that we've let things get to this point. My parents grew up in the duck and cover generation of nuclear war fears, which is actually looking pale compared to the fears that students are living under right now because it's a real threat. My wife teaches kindergarten. She's afraid to go in.
Are you?
No, I'm not. Look, I know we can solve this, and I've been in war zones before, so it's never stopped me from going to work or hesitated, but I don't want to see our country be one.
So before we run out of time, and I sort of compelled to ask this question, if in fact you did join the Democratic Conference, would you be able to support Nancy Pelosi to continue as leader?
I mean, we would see that at the time and see what she's putting forward and what's the agenda. My belief is we need an agenda that serves the people. We have to enact Medicare for all. We have to end our addiction to fossil fuels, and we have to stop militarism overseas, raise Social Security benefits, and provide for the vast majority of Americans. If that's the agenda, I'm on board.
Well, we will see. I thank you so much for your time. We're out of time.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure.